Good morning, everyone. I hope you guys are doing well and also staying safe and comfortable at wherever you might be right now, which is the beauty of having these kind of online sessions. So very interesting time, as Josh mentioned, is a lot of things have been changing in the past few weeks. Fortunately, in Hong Kong, I think that tends to be good news recently. And it's so many interesting things happening, I think, within the field that we're talking about today. So for instance, when we talk about employee experience, I still remember just like 2 to 3 weeks ago when I was speaking with my clients, we were talking about like working from home arrangement, how to kind of make it more effective, how do we monitor it. For online training, it was all about like webinars. Basically 100% of my trainings have gone to webinars and kind of online format. But just now, I think now a lot of clients are starting to talk about back to office integration, how to pick up the momentum. Yesterday, I just started kind of pick up my first kind of classroom hybrid Zoom kind of training. So yeah, I think good news for us here in Hong Kong is things seems to be picking up pretty well. Hopefully we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So literally yesterday, I was still kind of modifying the slides a little bit because I do want to make sure that the content is the most relevant for you guys. And of course, today I know that we have a lot of participants which has a lot of great experience in the HR field. So I do want to make this more like a conversation. So my sharing would be around like 20 to 30 minutes, hopefully just to kind of cover some key insights that I have been accumulating in the past month or two. And later on, I'm more than happy, as Jermaine mentioned, more than happy to kind of take some questions, or even if you have some thoughts or other ideas, more than happy just to kind of use this platform so we can all learn together. Okay. Great. So now what I'll do is I'll just shift to my slides, which I think would be easier for me to kind of share some of my thoughts. Okay, topic today, how can we maximize employee and learning experience under COVID-19? To begin with, just a brief introduction about myself, which I think Josh already gave me a pretty brief one. My name is Gary. So currently I own my firm, Glow Consulting, a training consultancy firm. So what I do is run a lot of different kind of corporate training programs. My focus is more on soft skills. So anything from storytelling, presentation skills, influencing, leadership, all the way to design thinking, and some of the topics we're talking about today in terms of employee and also customer experience. So previously, I also came from a corporate background, so working for different multinational firms like Apple, LVMH, Unilever. So hopefully the good news today is when I share with you everything that I'm doing, basically it is a lot of experience that I accumulated working with like my own corporates and also with a lot of different corporate clients that I work with right now. Because my focus is more on soft skills and also kind of employee customer design kind of area. So I do work with quite a wide range of different clients. So today, besides some of the things that I've learned, I think some best practices and maybe the way how we're going to move forward, I think those would be some key takeaways for you guys, and hope I'll be able to kind of cover that as well. Okay, so very simple agenda. I will start to talk about employee experience, which I'm not sure if in your company it's a big topic. Obviously, it has been more of a word that we're kind of mentioning nowadays. And also for some of you guys who might be thinking about, okay, online training, you might be doing it, you might be considering, you might be thinking about the pros and cons. I will share a little bit about my experience on that field. And most importantly, some best practices that I have been working with my clients, and maybe some suggestions for everyone if we want to kind of consider some next moves regarding these areas. Okay, so as I mentioned, I wanted to make this more like a conversation. So it's great that before Jermaine already helped us prepare a lot of pollings, which, okay, right now you should be seeing one of them. So before every topic, I would love to kind of get some of your input and some of your information as well. So Jermaine, if you could, yep, you should be seeing a pop-up poll on the screen. I guess most of you guys are pretty familiar with Zoom right now. So yeah, just one simple question. How would you rate the employee experience in your company? Okay, of course, to begin with, are you using this term right within the firm? But anyway, let us know your thoughts. Okay, good. The majority is good, around 60%. Below expectations are poor, kind of at the 18% range. Okay, so very typical bell curve. Okay, that's great distribution. Okay, so now as we talk about this topic, because obviously I think within the HR field, this is getting more and more attention. For some of you, you might be talking about this for a long time already. So I would also want to share with you maybe some of my insights regarding this. So just in case, for some who might not be that familiar with Zoom, I think the polling thing might be in front of you. So if you just want to take it away, just feel free to kind of drag it to the side, or you could also close that screen as well. So what is employee experience, right? I think really it's the reality from the employee's perspective, which as much as you, including like myself, we might be part of the team that is designing the employee experience. We are also one of the employees ourselves. So simply putting, this is basically our collective impression and feeling about the company. So a lot of times I would talk to my clients. So it's pretty straightforward, right? If you talk to any of your employees right now, just ask them to kind of share their top 3 feelings about working here in this company. Kind of measure that. Okay, is it going to sound neutral, positive, or negative when it's completely voluntary basis, right? So then we kind of get a sense, because employee experience does not happen at a certain point of time, just like customer experience. It's basically a whole journey, and you kind of accumulate a certain feeling throughout that journey. So obviously, it's not what the company does, because I know a lot of companies, we talk about employee experience, we do a lot, but guess what? Sometimes we miss one crucial part, is to really measure how our audience is perceiving it. Okay, so maybe one question for everyone right here in the room is, yeah, we might be doing a lot of efforts or initiatives for employee experience, but are we really measuring it? Because if we're not measuring it, it's almost like you're doing a lot of customer service on our behalf that we feel like we're doing a great job, but we never really kind of get feedback from our customers. Then there might be some gap in between that we could kind of better fit in there. And one thing I would like to say is employee experience is always on. So what I mean by that is, I know when I talk to some of my clients, they would say, hey, Gary, we don't talk too much about employee experience. So basically, we don't have the concept of employee experience. I would say no matter what you do or no matter what you do not do, it's still part of employee experience, right? You're going to tell me, hey, I never done anything about employee experience, so they shouldn't have an experience. No, that is not the case. If you don't do anything, that is exactly what they experience. If you're doing something, that is also exactly what they are experiencing. So I think just to kind of kick off this topic, because I know we have a wide range of audience right here, things to consider. Of course, number one, are we measuring our employee experience? And kind of to a certain extent, for some of the more sophisticated clients I'm working with, do you have a metric, right? I know some of you might be doing surveys, but do we have a really quantitative measure in terms of employee experience? Next thing, right? Are we gathering both quantitative and qualitative feedback, right? I know some companies, yeah, we just had some team building stuff and we were asking around and people felt it was great, okay? So that's one part, but if you really want to kind of drill into this topic a little bit more seriously, maybe we would need a quantitative figure so we could follow up and further improve on. Finally, yeah, we heard the feedback, but are we really acting upon it? I think that's a key part, because I'm sure if I talk to all the different HR professionals, everyone would say employee experience is important, but more importantly, have we really heard from the team? And based on what we heard, was it just a record? Was it just an Excel file? Or do we really follow upon that? And most importantly, let the team know that we are actually doing that. Okay, because behind the scenes, you might be doing a lot of improvement work. If the team is not able to appreciate or feel that, that would also maybe present some gap when it comes down to employee experience. Okay, so that's more the foundation. Okay, moving to the next topic. Again, we're gonna have a poll for you about this employee-centric culture. Okay, I'm not sure again if you're familiar with this topic, but please let us know your thoughts if you would be rating this. Again, similarly, we kind of had that bell curve, which is kind of expected. But the good news is we get less poor right here, okay? So that means maybe we do have a feeling that, yeah, we are kind of doing some good work in this regard. So what I want to prompt here is, usually when I work on a project with a client about employee experience, I like to prompt them to think in this way, which I'm not sure if you're doing in your organization, is what if we treat our employees like customers? So what is this concept really about? What I'm going to bring you through right now, because personally, I come from a marketing background. Basically, what I'm doing is just putting the whole marketing framework and then put it from an employee point of view and see what difference will we be able to make. So again, if the assumption is we are treating our employees just like a customer, of course, back to marketing 101, we always start from customer insights, right? So the same question, have we started from employee insights? That means currently, do we have any surveys? Do we have any kind of focus groups so we get both qualitative and quantitative feedback? At the same time, what kind of feedback channels do we have? So for instance, if I'm a staff, I realize there are some problems with the system, with the hardware that I really want to kind of raise up, propose something to hope for some changes. Is there a channel? Like, is there an email box, or is there like even a hardware mailbox which I could put up some note? Again, a lot of times it's not just about providing the feedback channel so people could give feedback, but really giving the perception that the leadership has this open mind to really hear from everyone. So then, leadership attention. We could talk about all these things, but at the end of the day, your employees are also smart people, right? You have initiated this kind of focus group or survey. But after you got the data, what have you done with it? Okay, are you telling us about, okay, this is what I heard, this is what you're going to do, and are you actually going to do it? So it's not just about running these things, but also how we follow up on it, because people see how you act, not how you talk. And of course, is this once off or ongoing? I also know some clients, what they're going to do is, yeah, I know recently the morale was kind of low. I'm going to be running all these kind of different surveys and also interviews. But right after that moment, then you kind of stop. Then you start to kind of give people the feeling is, okay, are you just interviewing people for the purpose to do some PR work? Which obviously is not a very good proposition to have as an employer. But if you use this metric as an ongoing thing in terms of everything that we're doing, we give a better sense for the employees to understand, yeah, this employee-centric thing is really part of our culture, which when it's part of your culture, you don't stop it, right? So I think that consistency also plays a big role. So right, after you have the customer insights, just like in marketing, now you have the employee insights, what would you do? We need to create a customer journey, okay? So hopefully one other concept which might be interesting is, have we thought about our employee journey? Okay, so if now we're doing this face-to-face, I would love to ask the crowd, where does the employee journey begin, right? Same question that I ask when I'm doing customer experience workshops is, where does customer experience begin? A lot of people would say, yeah, customer experience begins when people enter the store. I would say that is not true. Because when you really think about it, customer experience begin from day one that I have heard about the brand, because that would create excitement. And then the way that I'm going to approach your store, where your store is located, the outlook, everything is also part of my experience as well. So you feel like the employee journey only begin the day that your employee starts your work, maybe, okay, we could look at this in a bigger scale. Basically, I would say employee journey starts from our employer branding. Okay, so of course, my number one question for a lot of clients is, do you have a dedicated team or some dedicated staff to look over employer branding? We all understand branding is so important from a customer point of view, and we also understand how important it is to get the best talent in the market. So my question is, why would employer branding be less important than our consumer branding? Right? Because that helps us attract the best talent. And when we have the best talent, that also helps us better attract the best customers. Basically, they kind of correlate and work with each other. So now my question would be, number one, do we put any conscious effort thinking about our employer branding? So one concept that I teach in marketing is what we call brand DNA. That means if I could describe your brand in 3 words, okay, you just ask any random people, would you want to work for this company? Okay, when you think about this company as an employer, what are the top 3 words that come up? Well, obviously, people have heard about your company. There's a lot of word of mouth happening, and there's a certain perception. So what would be your current brand DNA, and what would you want your future brand DNA to be? So the question is, from an employer branding point of view, okay, what kind of channel are you promoting your employer branding? What is the perception you're building, right? Because in the past, when I was working in the university, I do a lot of info sessions. So who do you send out to represent the company? How do you kind of create that presentation, that overall experience where you do it actually makes a big difference. And finally, differentiation, because for a lot of, maybe you're hiring for fresh graduates, MBA graduates, they would say, hey, every day I'm seeing companies coming over to recruit. Why work for you, not your competitor, right? So what are we doing on this end? It's exactly putting the whole marketing hat back to recruitment, which would make a difference. Okay, then the second thing people would think, okay, now it comes to the day you get back to work, right? I would say there's still one thing in between, is the recruitment process, right? So I'm sure a lot of you guys might be working with Page, great company, very professional. So that would also be part of the experience, right? Because think about it, me or you as an employee, Think about the time when you were registering or kind of applying for a job. When the website really doesn't work, how do you feel? Right? You already have a perception about the employer. And okay, now if you have a nice website, nice application, you're not asking me unnecessary information. The time when you're really having an appointment for me for the interview, it was accurate, it was efficient, people were polite, I feel being respected, and all the timeline, okay, from the first interview to the final one to getting an offer, am I informed about the process? Okay, that whole interview experience already determines a big part before you come into the company. Okay, so I think this is one point that maybe some people do not put too much attention in, but I would say that is actually very key. The whole interview process. I would say our goal is to make people so excited during the interview process that they feel like they can't get to start work. Okay, so I would say out of all the employers that I've worked with, Apple has done a pretty good job doing this because exactly, they have people who looks after the whole employee journey to make sure, yeah, we get people pumped up before they come into the company. So when we come up, we are ready to serve, we are ready to kind of make a difference. So then, of course, when you come in, staff integration, right? Warm welcome. I remember the other day I was just looking in my Facebook account. I saw my friend just posting a post that when she first joined the company, there was a nice gift pack and a little cup with the company logo and also her name on it. And she felt proud. She was happy. She kind of took a photo, right? So yeah, if you think about it, these small things go a long way, right? In terms of that sense of belonging, how they feel about the company, and obviously orientation experience. Like I've worked for a lot of companies. Honestly, a lot of companies, I feel like I'm just sitting there and wait and see what's happening. As versus some company would proactively come up to you and design an orientation journey for you to kind of make sure everything is well done, well worked out. And also, are there any mentor programs if I have any kind of questions? So that integration part is also one key part. Then of course, then it comes to the actual employee experience, anything from hardware, software, which hardware means the office, the IT system, the location, blah, blah, blah. Software, anything from like the culture, your boss, working nature. So obviously there's a big topic there, and that is the field I'm sure that we're all familiar with. And finally, sense of belonging. So for all the companies that I worked with, which is in retail before, we usually like to measure one thing called the NPS, okay, the Net Promoter Score, which is one score that kind of determines how good the customer experience is. And it's gonna be a pretty long survey, but it boils down to one question. Is after I ask you about all the perception about different things, is I'm gonna ask you, are you going to recommend your friend to come to our store? Okay, it comes down to this, because you can say all the good things, you can say all the bad things. If you do not recommend, that's a different story. So now for some of the clients I'm working with, they also have a similar survey asking a similar question. Would you recommend your friends, of course, assuming they have similar interests, to work here? And of course, all these things are anonymous, right? So it would be a pretty interesting question to ask, because I'm sure every HR professional would be thinking, if less than 50% actually would recommend friends to work here, there might be some problems happening there. So hopefully this just kind of serves as a guide. Obviously, this is a very big topic, but how do we consider the overall employee journey actually determines how much work we put into every small detail. Experience is not about one point of time. It's about a continuum and accumulated feelings and impressions. Finally, we always talk about a customer-centric culture. And I remember one time when I was joining another seminar, people were asking me, how do you build a customer-centric culture? My best answer is start from an employee-centric culture. Because to be honest, nowadays I've been also working with a lot of retail clients. They have been saying, yeah, morale is low, business is not good, traffic is low. How do you kind of boost up the morale of the team? I would say, number one, we are asking our employees to care about our customers. But my question is, do our employees feel like we are taking care of them? Right? Because we're basically transferring the love from the corporate level to our employee so they could transfer the love to the customer front. Okay, that was my best learning in a retail setting. So basically, if you think about it this way, that comes back to our earlier question. If we always talk about a customer-centric culture, which I'm sure not any company would disagree with, then my other question is, do we have an employee-centric culture then? Okay, so what if, okay, this is a question. I'm not sure if your company is doing this. What if employee experience is part of our KPI? Okay, which I'm sure a lot of companies are doing these kind of 360 feedbacks. That's part of it. But my question is, are we just doing this because everyone is doing this? Or do we really measure this so it's going to be part of your bonus scheme? Okay, that's a completely different story. So I would say for some of the best retailers that I work with, why they're able to always keep a good store morale is because from the manager's point of view, maybe half of their incentive comes from the sales, half of the incentives come from your employee experience. So once this is part of your KPI, how managers would treat all these things would be completely different. So of course, I wouldn't say this fits for every single company or every single industry, but just some interesting things to think about. And of course, if we're doing this, how do we find a balance between what they say and what we do? Because it's the same for the customer, right? Even though if your customer gives you a lot of feedback or comments, that doesn't mean we do everything that they say, because we are here to kind of manage what is appropriate, what is the right thing to do. So same thing, if you open the gate for employee feedback, you also need to have a transparent and honest conversation to let them know, okay, we're opening this because we could hear you, but from a corporate point of view, we also have our priorities. So we're kind of finding a midpoint so we could do a win-win. Okay, so that fine balance, obviously it takes a little bit of leadership communication to find that sweet spot. Okay, so that was a little bit longer topic. I'll just move on to learning. So that was employee experience. Now coming to a topic that I'm very interested in, okay. Online learning approach. So again, you'll be able to see the poll. Great. So now, information. So yeah, interestingly is the below expectations and poor reaches around 30%, which is kind of higher versus some of our earlier posts. Okay, so I'm not sure which stage you are at this moment, but let me just try to kind of share some insights in terms of the common questions that I get from my clients. Of course, number one, people would say, hey, Gary, like, is online learning any good? It's kind of interesting because now we're almost at the time that we're shifting back to classroom learning, but still people are kind of thinking like, should we do online learning? So I would say in my point of view, before they were all face-to-face. Now, from my point of view, it's all online. So when people are going to ask, okay, in the future, do you see online to be a tool that we'll continue to use? I see like everything when we kind of face the post-pandemic era, it's like a pendulum swing, right? We were starting from the left and then we swung everything to the far right. I think after that, we will end up somewhere in between. So what I want to talk about is obviously the pros and cons of online learning, and obviously how could we better leverage it in the future. So cons, pretty obvious, right? I would love to be seeing everyone sitting in a nice room right now so I could kind of interact with you. I could see your facial expressions. We could kind of talk a little bit more. So less interaction, of course. Like today, Jermaine Josh has been kind enough to kind of create a lot of polls to get interaction. But still, compared to face-to-face, we're still lacking that human touch. And engagement-wise, like I do a lot of trainings that people are not opening their camera in the corporate, right? So what are they really doing in the training? Are they looking at other emails or stuff? Honestly, it happens and we kind of do the same. So it's hard to expect. So it's really tougher to get engagement and attention. But I would say, yeah, everything has the good part and the bad part. I would say I wouldn't focus too much on the cons because it is what it is. But start to kind of think about maybe the potential pros of online learning, which is something that I realized in the past 2 months, is obviously the reach is going to be much more broader. So interestingly, after I transferred to online training, I think I have been doing a lot more sessions, maybe with mainland market or maybe around the region. Because now we're not limited by our location. No matter where you are, when we have a webinar, we could pretty much touch everyone. And in the past, when I'm doing face-to-face workshop because of the location limitations, the kind of conveniency issues, I think typically I would have a session around like 15 to 30 people for a training workshop. But now, like for a lot of programs, just like today, we would have more than 100 people or sometimes up to a few hundred or even 1,000, right? So are we having the best engagement? Maybe not, but now we are having a much wider reach. So from my point of view, I kind of have this analogy is, okay, if you watch a movie, that would be the best experience. But the movie room is kind of limited in terms of space and vacancy. But now I could also make this movie into a YouTube version, which I could share with a lot of people. But is the YouTube the best experience? No, but how do we benefit from it? We benefit from the reach. So sometimes I think some of my client partners also see the cost efficiency because honestly, from a per head perspective, online tends to be a little bit better when it comes to cost efficiency. And I think the most important thing is a lot of companies are adopting online learning because they want to keep up that learning momentum. Because this is also part of your employer branding is even though, okay, some companies are waiting and thinking, But now at this time, if you're able to launch some online learning initiatives, it just gives people the perception, okay, the company is really committed in learning. They're being progressive, being innovative, and trying to make things work. So far, again, I think in the past month, I've been working for like nearly maybe, I don't know, 30 to 40 online training sessions. I would say overall the feedback is very well. Just I think part of it is it's pretty new to people. And the other thing is, yeah, they see the commitment from the employer of trying to do something different to kind of keep up their morale. Okay, so for instance, I had another client, their stores were all closed. So basically what they wanted to do is do a training just to talk about EQ and stress management so we could kind of boost up the morale of the team. So think about this from an employee experience point of view. Yeah, your employer is thinking about you right now, even though there's no business happening. That is actually a big part of the employee experience potentially as well. So I'm sure quite a lot of you might be already pretty sophisticated when it comes to online learning, but for some friends who still might be thinking about it, let me just try to answer some common questions. Number one, sometimes clients will be asking me, hey, Gary, but I don't have a platform. I would say out of all my online trainings, I would say maybe 70% of them are happening either on Zoom or Teams, okay, which is a fairly easily accessible tool. Zoom, that basically I think you're paying $20 to $30 on a monthly basis to kind of get a sizable platform to use just like today. So I would say it's very accessible. Of course, if your company has different security concerns, that's a different thing. But I would say you don't need a sophisticated LMS to kind of make this work, right? I would say in my experience, I don't want to kind of advertise for Zoom, but Zoom has been pretty stable and has been working pretty well in terms of all the shifting, everything that you see today. Teams, BlueJeans, Adobe Connect, WebEx. I'm sure every one of your company, you might be using a certain platform already. So if you don't have it, definitely try to work with your IT team. Again, it's pretty user-friendly in general. Shorter sessions, because online, obviously, it's harder to kind of grab people's attention. But usually if you do something in 1 hour for a larger size like today, 1.5 hour for a group size around 30 people, I think that tends to be the sweet spot, which you could kind of balance the content and also keep people engaged. And of course, you want to talk about more timely topics as well. So in the past month, basically, I've shipped a lot of new topics about EQ and stress management. Before I was teaching about face-to-face presentation skills. Now I'm teaching virtual presentation skills. Some storytelling. In the past, I was teaching people how to kind of bring up good news. Now I'm teaching people how to bring up bad news, okay? So just give employee the feeling that, yeah, we are tailoring something for you because we know you're dealing with a lot of challenges. So this is how we are planning to help you. Obviously, so when you do this, I know that some people are using internal trainers, some people are using consultants like myself, but make sure, because the skill set of virtual training is very different versus face-to-face, okay? So you wanna make sure their engagement style, it works well because it takes a little bit more effort to engage with people online, and also basic tech savviness, okay? I wouldn't say you need like a lot of tech stuff, but basically you're able to kind of operate all these kind of platforms. And finally, I would say tell a story, right? If all of a sudden I'm working in a firm and you're gonna tell me tomorrow we're gonna have online learning, maybe I'm not able to really appreciate. But if you're telling me, yeah, recently we kind of heard your feedback, we know that colleagues are having a lot of difficulties, challenges about this and that. In regards to that, we have actually designed a new program, which we have 3 topics, which is helping you to cater your major pain points right now. So then we're gonna run a campaign for the coming month. These are what we're gonna do. After that, we would hope to get your feedback and continue to improve on our learning journey to kind of help to make your work easier and more efficient. So that communication is also a big part. And I would say in terms of employee experience from an HR point of view, this is actually a great opportunity to show the employees how much we care. Okay, so final slide right here. What's next, which also comes to our final question, is are you considering to grow your online learning team? So for some of you, you might not be expanding headcounts, which I understand, but at least do you feel like you want to put more investment or more focus on online learning? I think that's where the question is coming from. Oh, wow. Okay, the winner is not at all, which is understandable because I know for some of you, you might be thinking online learning as more a temporary solution. But of course, also pretty interesting to see quite a high rate in potentially the next 3 months, okay? So of course, I think that depends on your industry, the nature of your staff, and also how they like to engage. But again, from my point of view, I do really feel like online learning is an option, right? I wouldn't directly compare it to face-to-face. It's more like when you're in a war, right? You could choose to use a sword, you could use a bow and arrow. is just an option, right? It kind of serves different needs. For me, it's more like one is for engagement face-to-face, and really online is for reach. But one interesting insight that I had is if you kind of consider your whole employee as a triangle in terms of engagement level, right? So there's a smaller portion of people who are fully engaged in terms of training. A lot of people on the bottom are less engaged. What I realize is, of course, if I am that super engaged learner, no matter it's going to be face-to-face, online, I'm going to join anyway. But one thing that I realized the beauty of online learning is because, like, if you think about it, it's pretty convenient, right? You now might be at home, you might be at office, just plug and play, 1 hour, you don't need to move around. A lot of people on the bottom end, which in the past, they would not want to spend their time to do a face-to-face session. Now, actually, they're pretty open to just kind of do an online session. So now I'm actually attracting people down here, and I don't feel like it's really cannibalizing the people who would enjoy a face-to-face session anyway. So if you feel like you have kind of like a similar triangle in your organization, you want to pick up some learning momentum from people who are a little bit disengaged at the bottom, online might be a pretty interesting place to begin with. Just like a lot of us would watch YouTube videos, right, for some simple learning. But would you be willing to pay for an online course? Maybe not, okay? So for those kind of people, maybe online learning should just serve as a taster to let them feel how it would help them in their work. Okay, so basically back to two topics: employee experience and also training, also learning. Something to share. Number one, of course, I know that for every single one right here, you might be at a different stage in terms of employee experience, but just maybe for those who might not have been starting and you're thinking about starting it, number one, decide on how to measure it first. I know that sometimes client would ask me, hey, Gary, what is a good way to measure it? Honestly, it depends on a lot of stuff. It depends on your culture, it depends on what you're focused on, and also it depends on what could be changed, right? Because if you're asking your employees about some feedback, which no matter what they say, you're not able to change it, then that might not be a very good question to ask to begin with. So how are we gonna measure it? Are we gonna put up a metric like an NPS or something? And again, establish feedback channels, okay? Are you going to do it monthly, quarterly, yearly? How do we kind of have that figure? It's just like any sales target, right? We look at a sales target, again, employee experience. Are we getting there? Are we improving? How are you going to measure all those metrics? Second thing, really communicate. I think it's not just about really asking feedback from an employee. Of course, we want that, but the process of getting feedback itself is already a communication. I hope you kind of get what I mean, is because just once you start to kind of show this sincerity of, I want to get your feedback, and management would actually improve upon it when it makes sense, that I think is the ultimate message that actually improves employee experience. Because to be honest, even if you open some really good feedback channels for anonymous feedback, would a lot of people really give you feedback? Sometimes maybe no. But as an employee, knowing that there is a feedback channel available, would that make me feel better about the company? Yes. So I think that feeling of letting the people know that we're actually listening and trying to make a difference, I think that is also a key part. So I would definitely try to get engagement not only from the HR function, but also for senior management, that if we're committed to do this, this is not an HR thing. This is pretty much a company thing. And finally, if we're going to do it, commit to it, right? So look at the figures, keep your team posted in terms of how we're doing, how we can improve, and what we're doing to improve, and show progress. Okay, let them know we're following up with stuff. I think that's going to be really key. So eventually it's going to be part of our culture. So for a lot of my clients, basically for every town hall meeting that they do, there's always going to be a section that updates the latest status about employee experience and what are our latest moves. Some might even set up a small committee within the firm, which kind of consists of different employees from different functions. So they kind of drive that effort together. And online learning. Of course, let's start from our L&D objectives. I wouldn't say online learning is particularly good or bad, but depends on what you want to deliver, right? If it's more like a one-way informative, maybe online will be pretty good. If you want to do something more interaction, more simulation, then maybe you need a little bit more face-to-face. Also, identify the right platform. Again, for some of you who might be struggling, I don't know where to begin with, just begin with Zoom, right? I think Zoom Teams, pretty good place to start with. And also it's very affordable in terms of cost. Finally, of course, I have been learning through the past month. After running a few sessions, I thought I felt more at ease. So same for you. Would your first online learning would be the best one? I'm not sure, but it's all about trial and learning. But I think the more important part is not about the absolute experience for your first online learning, but showing the company that you're willing to invest on that end and you are really dedicating to their learning and growth. So I think that would also be a key part. So just to kind of conclude my part right here, I'm sure you heard about this quote: people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people would never forget how you made them feel. Okay, so I think this is the same for employee experience. Maybe my question for you is, everyone right here, we are an employee as well. So what was your best employee experience in your career? What happened at that time? And if I could duplicate that experience back in my firm, what could I do differently? Okay, so I think when we start to kind of think more from an employee point of view, but not an employee experience designer point of view, hopefully with that empathy, I think we would be making quite a difference, because eventually we want happy customers, and happy customers come from happy employees. So that's my part. Just shared some simple contact information. Of course, we're going to go to Q&A, but just in case, you can feel free to connect me on LinkedIn or also email. So now I would pass the time back to maybe Jermaine and Josh and see if we have any questions or any sharing right here.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much for all the insights, Gary. That was really interesting what you said. I think what really connected with me is what when you mentioned that employees are now the new customers. Obviously, there's a lot of talk right now, a lot of articles, a lot of people are saying that, yes, we are moving in an age where everyone used to talk about customers, right?
Yep.
The customer experience, but now everyone's moving from CX to EX, the employee experience.
Yep.
How companies doing that, and how they should really be treating their employees like customers is very important to us, and that really resonated with me. So thank you. And going to the questions that we have, the first one, which actually has quite a few votes from Jess, so thank you, Jess. Her question is around what I think is really important for us, which is personal branding in the workplace. So she wants to know, how do you build a personal touch for yourself when people are not meeting face to face anymore?
So I think first of all, thank you for the question, Jess. I think what you're mentioning about is like at this point of time, right, we're not having that kind of face-to-face meeting. So I like to put it this way, right, because for some workshops that I deliver for clients, my role is really kind of putting the team together again, because we feel so distanced. And I usually like to say, yeah, I think we are more physically distanced than ever, but mentally, actually, I think somehow we're a little bit more connected, right? Because we are sharing a common challenge. We're more connected that way. So I think it's really having that empathy to think from an employee point of view, right? So for instance, recently I have been running a series of parenting workshops for a company, which obviously that company is not about parenting. But why am I doing this is because precisely they were using the design thinking model to think about what would their employees want and what they're really struggling with. And they are telling them, hey, I'm actually not struggling with Zoom. I'm not struggling with this work from home tech arrangement. I'm struggling with my kids, right? So now in a sudden, you're not seeing them just as an employee who works at your desk, but really an individual as a whole. And you know that they have their personal struggles. So I'm sure like early on when you were giving out masks or hand sanitizers, well, honestly, those things go a long way, right? So my thing is, when you really want to create a small surprise or something, a decent surprise, because exactly as Jermaine mentioned, right? EX equals CX. If now we treat our employees as a customer, we always want small delights for customers, right? So what would be that small delight for an employee that they would really feel proud and feel that personal touch? My guideline is give them something that is so good that they want to post it on Facebook or social media. Okay? If you cannot pass the Facebook IG test, chances are we could think a little bit more. Okay, so I think hopefully back to Jess' question, yes, physically we're distanced, but mentally, just because we were having those parenting workshops. For the other company, as I mentioned, the whole retail operations closed, but we're still running this workshop with you to kind of keep your morale up. I think those are the small things that when people feel like, yeah, the company really cares, though we're doing it online, but yeah, that actually might create a very special, unique personal touch that we're not able to create even when we're doing this face-to-face.
Thank you, Gary. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, when it comes to social media and a company's presence on it, it is so important that they also think about that as, employer branding, because people are interacting on social media every day. They see your hashtags, they see what you post. And, with whatever's going on, people turn to social media 24/7. It never ends. It never stops.
Yes, that will just continue.
And the next question I have is, do you feel that there are any topics or any skills particularly that shouldn't or cannot be taught online?
Okay. Good question. So from a training perspective, I would say some topics are more informative. Some more topics are more experiential. So I would say now my online topics are more on the informative side. So for instance, what topics I'm not able to teach online is one, design thinking. Because when I teach design thinking, I take the team to go through the whole process and we need to think together. So there's going to be a lot of face-to-face interaction, post-it notes, all those stuff. I know Zoom has breakout rooms, but to be honest, it does not serve the same purpose, right? And if you think about it, it's not just group discussions. People also need to kind of come up from the breakout room and do sharing, right? So then you need to consider how comfortable they are sharing in front of the camera. A lot of those stuff, like honestly, sometimes I would advise my client, if you really want to do those things, I'd rather you wait for some time, right? But nowadays, so I would say if it's something more mindset related or experiential, face-to-face would always be better. But if right now you just want to give people some quick tips to kind of change things, I would say on the online platform, people tend to be more practical. So it's going to be more short-term and kind of really kill my problem right away. So that's why I mentioned like now I do a lot of in terms of like how to run virtual meetings more effectively, how to do virtual presentations better, how to do storytelling in bad times. Because I think people, if they want to commit to online, they want something fast. I think that's just human nature. Everything online, they want it quick, they want it fast.
I'm guilty of that. It's 2020. Everything must come now and fast.
Yes.
And this is also quite a popular question. What do you think is the most important factor when building an employee-centric culture?
Great question. I would have to say it comes from management endorsement. Like honestly, if the top person in the firm does not agree with this sentiment, you're not going to make a difference. Because what is culture? From my point of view, it's just the value and norms created by leadership, right? Culture is something that's very vague, but actually people could feel it from like what leadership says, what they do, what they act, what they encourage, what they punish. Basically, that is subtly forming that kind of culture or boundary for our staff, right? So I would say that's back to the question, which is, again, drawing back to that relevance from customer experience. Usually I would tell people, if you are a company, you are trying to drive customer experience. And if you tell me you have someone leading the customer experience function, there's a good chance you would fail. Because I would say customer experience is not led by one person. Customer experience is something that's infused within the whole organization, and the ultimate owner has to be the leader. So same thing for employee experience, right? If somehow the leader comes to you and say, hey, HR, we need to kind of deal with employee experience, do it, right? Then that is already telling me somehow it's not really that employee centric, right? Because you are also an employee, right? Why would they say, hey, this is what you should be in charge of? So I would say, given today we have a lot of friends from the HR professional, so that's why storytelling is important, right? How are we able to convince management why employee experience is important, right? So in the past, when I do this, there's a lot of metrics or figures that you could find out whenever you want to find something that correlates with customer experience. To be honest, it's common sense. It has to be employee experience. If your employees are not happy, how would you expect them to make your customers really happy, right? It doesn't really kind of add up. So hopefully starting from management endorsement and then top down, I think that's going to be the key.
Okay. Thanks, Gary. And the next question, I personally quite like this because it's something I struggle with sometimes, self-motivation, and I know my peers do. So what this person wants to know is, do you have any suggestions on how to build a self-learning online culture? I mean, obviously the online world is a massive resource.
Yes. And,
there are a lot of available resources as well in a company, but sometimes colleagues have a lot of different reasons not to do it, right? They're too busy, they're not interested, they have distractions. So what are your suggestions on how to kind of instill that self-motivation in yourself?
Right. Great question. I think a lot of people are struggling about this. So I would say, number one, make this a campaign. Don't make this just a training. Okay. What I mean by this is don't just all of a sudden send an email to everyone and tell you, okay, next week we're going to have an online training. That doesn't work very well. Make it a campaign. That means I mentioned about telling a story, right? So where you might need to begin with is, first of all, set the context. Recently, I have heard that a lot of colleagues are struggling in certain fields. So we're trying to kind of collect your learning needs to kind of get to know what you're really struggling with. We have already conducted a few focus groups, and I know these are the topics that you guys have mentioned. So can we have a survey and voting to see what you are the most interested in, right? Start from there. And then after you gather the feedback, email everyone again. Okay, thank you for your feedback. After that, we understand that these 3 topics are the key topics, and we will work on kind of developing some content for you. and then come back. Yes, we finally have these 3 classes. And guess what? We have limited spaces for each class because people are like this, right? Because if you just kind of give them free for anything, they're kind of, okay, let's see, right? If you have limited speeds, just like any kind of luxury selling idea, when it's limited, people just kind of, okay, let's kind of go for it. Of course, I wouldn't say this is going to be like a guaranteed winner, but hopefully I think the key concept is really make it a campaign. Bring it out. This is a story. The key thing is you need to let the employee know is I am not running an online training just because everyone is doing it or I need to do it. It's just because based on I see what you're struggling with, I try to listen to you and I try to offer what's available for you. So I might even ask the question, do you feel like online learning topics would be helpful? If you already have surveys which is telling you 70% would say yes, then you could kind of ride on that and just develop your whole narrative. Again, employee experience, a big part is also about your communication, right? Just like customer experience. You need to let the customer know that I have heard you, what we have done, and now here are the differences. So try to kind of pan that out a little bit. Hopefully your employee will feel differently about the same initiative that you're running.
Thank you, Gary. I mean, creating a demand for your own training sessions, I like that in the company. I think I may use that idea for myself.
That's nice.
The next question, which came in from Serena, so thank you. Do you have any tips on aligning employee experience and commercial priorities in a company? For example, when you need to improve how employee feels about a company while driving business results in a sales organization, which would, maybe be especially pertinent in a time like this.
Okay, gotcha. First of all, thank you for the question, Serena. So I think that comes back to the basic question that I asked before, is the top person in the firm aligned? Because honestly, if the top person in the firm, I hope I'm not saying this too bluntly, feels that, okay, we need to go after business goals, so now let's prioritize less in terms of employee experience. If they feel like these metrics are different, honestly, it's already pretty challenging to begin with in terms of this culture, because in order to kind of make this successful, the foundation and the kind of basic belief is employee experience is actually related to your business, right? So the thinking is kind of like, okay, again, let me try to kind of bring this back to a service or a retail point of view. For a lot of the best retailers that I work with, yes, sales is going to be one thing that we look into, of course. But how do we achieve sales is not looking into how to drive sales. What we look into is how to drive the best customer experience, because we understand as long as we keep on driving customer experience, sales would become a result. Okay, so we still care about sales, but our focus is on customer experience. Which there was a great quote from Howard Schultz, the founder and CEO of the ex-CEO of Starbucks. He had a quote that I like very much. He said, when he first found Starbucks, it's not about thinking how to sell 1 million cups of coffee every day. It's about thinking how to perfect every cup of coffee and perfect every coffee experience. And as long as we focus on this experience, as a result, we would sell 1 million cups of coffee. Okay, so I think that was a brilliant quote. And again, for all the top retailers, they think the same. It doesn't mean we don't care about sales, but we just understand if we want sales to go up, it's not about just looking at sales. It's about looking at the customer experience. So if you already understand the correlation between sales and customer experience, my next question is, what could drive up customer experience? So of course, this is a belief that you need to agree on, is I personally strongly believe employee experience is directly related to customer experience, which honestly, these are actual figures that I've seen for companies who are measuring this. It's always correlated. So your thing is, if we continue to focus to maximize employee experience, customer experience going up would be a result and sales would also be a result. So hopefully back to Serena, your question is, again, that might take a little bit education in terms of like different people or different stakeholders, but I do want to kind of believe in this way is they're all aligned together.
Thank you, Gary. And I'm also a little bit conscious of time. We promised the attendees here that this would be maybe a 55-minute to 1 hour webinar. So I'm just going to conclude with one last question from the polls that we have. So Madeline would want to know, how do you build your personal brand and employee brand online? And at the same time, show a bit of your personal touch.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Thank you, Madeline, for the question. Okay, that just hits a topic because just yesterday I was running a workshop about personal branding. Okay, let me start from this. Okay, from a personal branding point of view, my thinking is, number one, start from the brand DNA, right? Which is what I mentioned. If I could use 3 words to describe you as a person or 3 words to describe a company as an employer, which 3 words would I use? Make an honest assessment of what we're having right now. Then the next question is, okay, ideally, what kind of brand DNA would I need to form? Okay, so we have current, we have our goal. Then think about what are contributing to these kind of perceptions. Again, a branding or experience is all about all these kind of touch points, anything from what you have done and what you have not done. So I think specifically back to your question about online, for instance, at a personal level, I would say, how would you want to project yourself? If you want to project yourself as a passionate and dedicated person in a certain field, what I would do, at least on LinkedIn, is be a little bit more active, right? Then post things with an exclamation mark, right? Show your passion, always show you're learning something new. When you do this consistent enough, you are building a certain perception. So when I bring this back to the employer point of view, which I see a lot of my clients doing right now, is whenever they have trainings, they promote it, right? They let the world know, because they understand from a lot of other people who are considering the company, when they see, wow, this company, it's always about training this, it's always about like new initiatives in terms of employee experience. When they see this, they start to form that one brand DNA is maybe this employer cares. Right, so I'll just take one very example. I'm sure not everyone is working for Google, but have you heard about the free lunch at Google?
Yes.
If you've heard about it, does it go a long way? Yes, and Google is also famous for taking care of your kids for some kind of initiatives as well. So these things, because they understand employer branding, you should treat it just like a customer branding. So I would say when you put it into that mindset, hopefully the things that I've shared today would make a little bit more sense. Is, again, the same question. What if we treat our employees just like a customer? We need to build brand awareness, right? We need to build brand perception. How do we do the same thing? Or sometimes I would even suggest you could invite your marketing colleagues to come out and work together as a project. We have campaigns on the customer front. We could definitely have campaigns on the employee front as well.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, that was very insightful, especially everything you said around, the experience, what employees need to know, and obviously what the management and every company needs to know, and every employee really as an ambassador. So thank you so much for all your insights and presenting today.
Welcome.
Josh, would you like to close this webinar with a few lines?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much both to Gary and Jermaine for doing such a fantastic job today. I really appreciate the insights, Gary, you've been able to bring, and Jermaine, I appreciate you taking a bit of time out of your diary today to help make this so seamless. A big thank you as well to our team that have put this together in the background, so Jess and Natalie and all their teams. So thank you very much to them. Appreciate also the audience for taking time out today. We're going to conclude by sending through a survey, which will just be at the end of this Zoom call. So if you could just fill that out, give some insight, that's always helpful for us to be moving forward. We'll be sharing Gary's presentation later today. Within that, it'll have all Gary's information. I can still see we've got a raft of questions coming through at the moment. So Gary can certainly come through and answer any of those and go from there. But again, thank you from all of us here at PageGroup, and I hope everyone has a fantastic day today. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
everyone.
Okay, have a good day. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.